The Relic Warship had been a museum piece for 900 years, and on the day the laughter started, it was still wearing the velvet rope they had hung across its main gun. Observer Quill of the sable-marked Concorde stood on the viewing platform and recorded the joke for the official archive. The ship hung in the center of the great hall like a dead whale strung up for children to gawk at. It was long and gray and ugly, scarred down one flank, missing half its sensor blisters, and someone in the curator's office had bolted a brass plaque to its nose that read, in the trade tongue, "Human war vessel, pre-collapse era, non-functional." Quill had read that plaque 100 times. Everyone had. It was the single most photographed object in the Concorde. The counselors had come to laugh at it on purpose. That was the part Quill would remember later, when the remembering became painful. They had not stumbled across the ship. They had chosen it. The Concorde's High Assembly had voted, with great seriousness, to hold their war summit inside the Hall of Quaint Antiquities, beneath the corpse of the only warship the long-dead humans had ever left behind, because the symbolism was delicious. The galaxy was about to be cleansed, and they wanted to be photographed doing it under the bones of the last species, foolish enough to fight a cleansing. Quill's people did not fight the bloom. No one fought the bloom. You did not fight a thing that turned your lungs to gray felt and your children to standing statues of spore. You managed it. You quarantined, you sealed, you sacrificed the infected worlds early and burned them clean from orbit, and you called that victory because there was no other word available. For 400 years, the sable-marked Concorde had managed the Whitlung bloom this way, world by world, retreat by retreat, and they had grown very proud of their managing. The summit was meant to announce a new plan, a final plan. They had a name for it that Quill found tasteless even then, the Mercy Protocol. Burn the rimward third of Concorde space, 80 inhabited worlds, 4 billion citizens, all of it, before the bloom could spread inward to the core. Cut off the arm to save the body. The counselors would sign it here, beneath the dead human ship, and the cameras would carry the moment to every screen in the Concorde, and history would record that they had been brave enough to do the necessary thing. Counselor Myash was the one who started the laughing. He was old and silver and very sure of himself, and he gestured up at the warship with one long arm and asked the hall a question that was meant to be rhetorical. "They built ships of iron," he said, "and they fought their plagues with iron, and where are they now? Gone. Eaten. We are wiser. We do not fight the unwinnable war. We make the hard choice. We survive." The hall laughed. 400 delegates, soft and certain, laughing up at a gray hull that could not laugh back. Quill recorded it. Quill, if he is honest in the archive, laughed a little too. That was the moment a single amber light came on inside the dead ship. No one saw it at first. It was a small light, deep in the forward hull, behind a window so grimed with 9 centuries of dust that the curators had given up cleaning it. But Quill's recording caught it, frame by frame, because Quill's recording caught everything. One light, then a second, further back, then a long rolling cascade of them, running the whole length of the hull from nose to stern, as if something very large and very old were opening its eyes one at a time and counting the room. The brass plaque on the nose said non-functional. The plaque was wrong. There was a woman inside the ship. Quill did not know that yet. None of them did. They believed the warship was a hollow shell, gutted centuries ago, its crew dust, its reactor cold. But there was a woman in the dark of its medical bay, and she had been there a very long time, and she had just opened her eyes. Her name was Edda Forstall. She had been the ship's surgeon. She was not a soldier. She had never fired the great gun, never plotted a course, never given a battle order in her life. She mended people. That was the whole of what she was for, and she had gone to sleep in the long cold of the medical bay 900 years ago with a promise on her lips and a sealed vial in her hand, and she had told the ship to wake her only if the promise could finally be kept. The ship had a name too, though the curators had scrubbed it off the hull and replaced it with the plaque. Its name was Iron Verdict. It had been built in the last bad years of the human war against their own version of the bloom, the thing the records called the rot, and it had not been built to conquer anyone. It had been built to be the last hospital that could still shoot back. It carried the largest cold medical bay any human ship had ever flown, and it carried a single weapon system that the rest of the galaxy had spent 9 centuries forgetting how to be afraid of. Edda Forstall sat up in the dark. Frost cracked off her shoulders and fell in a slow gray rain. Around her the bay lit itself one panel at a time, the way the hull had lit itself, the ship waking room by room like an old animal stretching. "Status," she said. Her voice was a ruin. She had not used it in 900 years. The ship answered her. Its voice was deep and patient, and very tired, and it had been keeping a vigil the entire time she slept, watching the stars turn, listening to a galaxy talk about plagues it did not understand. "They are still dying," the ship told her. "Out there. Right now, a spore plague, the same shape as the rot. They have learned nothing. They are about to burn 80 of their own worlds to be rid of it." Edda Forstall closed her eyes. When she opened them they were wet, and then they were hard. "Then the promise can be kept," she said. "Wake the rest of them. Wake all of it. We have work to do." Far above her, in the bright laughing hall, Counselor Maish was still gesturing up at the dead gray ship, still smiling, still sure, when the velvet rope across the main gun began, very slowly, to slide off and fall. The velvet rope hit the floor of the hall, and 400 delegates stopped laughing all at once. Quill's recording shows the exact moment. The counselors are mid-smile, mid-gesture, mid-joke, and then a sound comes out of the dead ship that none of them have ever heard. It is not a voice. It is a low mechanical groan, metal against metal, the sound of a thing 900 years asleep, deciding to move. Dust sheets a meter thick slid off the upper hull and crashed down onto the exhibition floor below in great gray avalanches. A maintenance drone that had been buffing the warship's flank for 2 centuries was swatted aside and shattered against a pillar. Counselor Maesh's arm was still raised. He had been pointing at the ship to mock it. Now he was simply pointing at it, and his mouth had stopped working. Inside, Edda Forstall moved through her ship like a woman walking through her own memory. She knew every corridor. She had bled in half of them. The crew bunks were empty, the long frozen sleepers having passed quietly in their pods over the centuries. All but her, all but the surgeon who had ordered the ship to keep her alive at the cost of every other cold cell aboard. She had made that choice herself. She had hated making it. The ship had asked her, 900 years ago, "Who shall I keep?" And she had answered, "The one who knows how to finish it." And that was her. And so she had buried her whole crew to live alone for the chance to keep one promise. She did not let herself grieve them yet. There was no time. The ship was telling her things as she walked, fast and grim, painting the situation across the inside of her vision. The bloom outside was the rot, not a cousin of it, not a rhyme of it. The same organism, the same gray felt-lung death, the same standing statues, the same patient inward creep. 900 years ago, the humans had faced it across their own small cluster of worlds, and they had very nearly lost. They had burned worlds too, in the early bad years, the same panicked amputations the Concorde was about to perform. And then a surgeon and a ship and a single idea had found another way, and the humans had not needed to burn anything ever again. An iron verdict carried that idea sealed in a vial in the surgeon's hand. The Concorde did not have the idea. The Concorde had only the burning. "Show me the worlds they mean to kill," Edda said. The ship showed her. 80 points of light along the rimward arc, each one a world, each one full of people who did not yet know their own council had voted to set them on fire. Quarantine fleets were already moving into position around the rimward third, not to defend it, but to make sure nothing escaped it before the burn. The Mercy Protocol was not a debate, it was a schedule. The first world was to be cleansed in 11 hours. Edda Forstall stood very still in the heart of her waking ship and did the arithmetic that surgeons do, the cold arithmetic of who can still be saved. 11 hours, she said. "We can reach the first one in 9 if you push." "I can push," said the ship. "Then push." She put her hand flat against the bulkhead. the way she used to touch a patient's chest to feel the heart still beating under it. And before we go, I want them to know we are awake. I want the ones who laugh to hear us. Open a channel to the hall. In the hall, the dead ship spoke. Quill's recording carries the voice perfectly, and Quill has played it back 10,000 times since, and it never stops raising the small hairs along his neck. It was not loud. It did not need to be. It rolled out across 400 suddenly silent delegates in the trade tongue. Fluent, ancient, unhurried, the accent of a dead civilization speaking through a throat of iron. You are about to burn 80 worlds, the ship said, because you have decided your plague cannot be beaten. You are wrong. It was beaten 900 years ago by the people you came here to laugh at. The cure is aboard this vessel. We are going to deliver it. You are welcome to follow and watch, or you are welcome to stay here under your cameras and explain to history why you preferred the fire. Counselor Maish found his voice at last. He was a proud man, and pride dies hard. That ship is a relic, he said, to the hall, to the cameras, to himself. It is a corpse. It cannot even leave the building. The cure to the Whitlung bloom does not exist. If it existed, we would have it. We are the Sable Mark Concord. We have 10,000 researchers. You have fear, the ship said, dressed up as wisdom. We have met the rot before. You have not. Stand aside. And then Iron Verdict tore itself out of the museum. Quill's recording of the next 4 seconds is famous now. It is taught in academies. The warship did not drift gently out of its cradle the way a careful pilot would have. It fired its docking thrusters at full burn inside an enclosed hall, blew the great ceremonial doors off their 900-year hinges, and drove itself out through the opening into the void, scraping a long, bright gouge down its own museum-clean flank, taking a chunk of the Hall of Quaint Antiquities with it. The brass plaque that said non-functional spun off into space, end over end, and was never seen again. 400 delegates threw themselves to the floor as 900 years of dust and debris and the corpse of a warship roared past them and out into the dark. When the dust settled, the velvet rope lay across an empty cradle, and the Sable Mark Concord had a problem it had not had 11 minutes earlier. There was a human warship loose in their space, and it was heading rimward, and it was faster than anything they owned. The quarantine fleet that met Iron Verdict at the first doomed world was the Concord's pride. 300 ships, sleek and white and new, the best the Corps could build, and they had a single grim job, to make sure nothing crossed the quarantine line before the rimward third burned. Their admiral was a careful officer named Veth Korin, and Veth Korin had been managing plague lines his whole life, and he was good at it, and he had absolutely no idea what he was looking at when one battered gray relic came over the horizon and slowed to a stop in front of his 300 ships. "It is a museum piece," his censor officer told him, reading the returns, baffled. "Admiral, the signature matches the Concord exhibit, the human exhibit, the one in the hall." "That is not possible," said Veth Korin. "No, sir," agreed the censor officer. "It is not." Iron Verdict hailed them. Edda Forstall's voice this time. Not the ships, because she had decided the people about to be lied to about their own deaths deserved to hear a living throat. "I am the surgeon of this vessel," she said. "Below you is a world your council has scheduled to burn in 2 hours. I am going to land. I am going to seed its atmosphere with a counter-agent that will kill the bloom and leave everything else alive. You can let me through, or you can try to stop me. I would think very carefully about the second one." Admiral Veth Korin had his orders, and his orders did not include letting an unidentified vessel cross the quarantine line under any circumstances, and so he did what a careful officer does. He gave the relic one warning, and then he gave the order to fire. 300 ships opened up on Iron Verdict at once. Quill was not there. Quill saw it later. From the gun camera records the Concord tried and failed to bury. He has watched it many times. The barrage that hit Iron Verdict in that first salvo would have erased any vessel in the Concord fleet down to vapor. It was enough firepower to crack a small moon. It hit the gray relic full on the nose, the same nose that had worn a brass plaque, and it splashed. it splashed. The fire ran around an unseen shell 100 meters off the warship's hull, sheeting and breaking like water against a stone, and where it broke it died. An iron verdict came on through the middle of it untouched, not slowing, not turning, a gray ghost walking through a storm that could not find it. The human war against the rot had been a war fought inside the worst plagues imaginable, and the ship had been built to survive seeding a hot world's atmosphere while infected ships clawed at its back. It had a skin the Concorde could not even properly see, let alone breach. 300 ships hammered it for 90 straight seconds and did not scratch the museum dust off its flank. And then Iron Verdict rolled, slow and enormous and contemptuous, and showed them why it had needed a velvet rope across its main gun. It did not fire on the fleet. This is the part Quill always makes his students sit with. It had 300 ships dead to rights, ships that had just tried to murder it, and it did not fire on a single one of them. The great gun the Concorde had roped off as a quaint antique was not a weapon for killing ships. It had never been a weapon for killing ships. The humans, in the worst years of the rot, had stopped building things that killed and started building one thing that healed at scale, and the great gun of Iron Verdict was that thing, and the surgeon was about to use it the way it was meant to be used. The gun fired. A single soundless pulse, vast and pale and gold, rolled down out of the warship and into the atmosphere of the doomed world below. Admiral Vethkoran's sensor officer made a noise no one had taught him to make. "Admiral," he said, "the bloom signature. On the surface, it is dropping. The spore count, it is falling. Across the whole hemisphere. It is, sir, it is dying. The bloom is dying." For 400 years, no one in the sable-marked Concorde had ever once seen the bloom die. They had seen it managed, contained, outrun, and burned, but they had never seen it simply die and leave the people under it alive. The careful admiral stared at his readouts with the look of a man whose entire life has just been revealed to him as a failure of imagination. Iron Verdict's main gun swung, slow and certain, and pulsed again, and a second hemisphere of dying bloom bloomed under it, like a wound closing. The whole world, in 2 pulses, a world the Concorde had been hours from setting on fire was, instead, being cured. "Admiral," said the sensor officer, very quietly, "what do we do?" Vethkoran looked at the gray relic, at the 300 guns that could not touch it, at the world below being pulled back from the edge of the fire, and he made the first wise decision of a long, unwise war. "We do nothing," he said. "We stand aside, and someone get me a channel to the hall. The council needs to see this before they sign anything." Etta Forstall felt the cure take. She felt it the way she had felt every patient she had ever saved, a loosening in her own chest, the body of a world deciding to live. She put her hand against the bulkhead again. "1," she said. 79 to go. Take us to the next one." "There is a difficulty," said the ship. She had known there would be. There always was. "Tell me." "The counter-agent. The vial." The ship's voice was careful now, the way it was careful when it had bad news for its surgeon and did not want to hurt her with it. 900 years in cold storage. It has not degraded, but it was never meant to seed 80 worlds. It was meant to seed perhaps a dozen, and then be cultured and grown in a proper lab over years. We have enough live agent for 9 more worlds at full strength. After the 9th, the gun fires nothing but salt water. Etta Forstall stood in the heart of her ship and felt the old, cold arithmetic come back. The surgeon's arithmetic. The arithmetic of who can be saved and who cannot. And for one moment, she was 900 years younger, and standing over a triage table, choosing which of 3 children to keep. 9 more, she said, and 80 worlds. Yes. So I choose 9, and I let 71 burn. Her voice did not shake. Surgeons do not let their voices shake. The patient is listening. That is not why I woke up. I did not bury my whole crew to save 9 worlds out of 80. "There is another option," said the ship. "You will not like it. I have not liked anything since I woke up. Tell me." The ship told her. And Etta Forstall, surgeon of Iron Verdict, who had never in her life given a battle order, listened to her ship describe the option and went very still, and then said the only thing a surgeon can say when the only cure left is the one that costs everything. "Show me the math," she said, "all of it. If we are going to do this, I want to see every number before I say yes." The ship showed her the math. It was worse than she had feared, and it was also, she realized as she read it, the only honest road left between 80 living worlds and the fire. There was a way to make the counter-agent stretch to all 80. There was a way to seed every doomed world at once, in a single rolling pulse that would cross the entire rimward third in one pass, but it required the ship to do something to itself that the ship had been built, in its last secret design, to be able to do exactly once, and never again, and not survive. Etta Forstall read the math 3 times. Then she looked up, at the bulkhead, at the ship that had kept vigil over her for 9 centuries, so that this exact morning could exist. "You knew," she said softly, "when they built you, they knew it might come to this. That is why you have the cold bay, and the gun, and the skin nothing can touch. You were never built to win a battle. You were built to be the thing that gets the cure to everyone at once, even if it kills you to do it." "I was built to keep a promise," said the ship. "So were you. We are the same machine, surgeon. We always have been." Far behind them, in the Hall of Quaint Antiquities, the cameras were still rolling, and 400 delegates were watching a feed from a quarantine fleet that showed a relic curing a world they had been about to burn, and Counselor Mash had stopped talking entirely, and for the first time in 400 years, the word that came into the Great Hall was not management, and not mercy, and not protocol. The word was wait. The signing of the Mercy Protocol was on hold. The galaxy held its breath, and Iron Verdict turned its scarred nose to the rim and ran for 79 worlds with 9 doses of cure and 1 impossible idea, and aboard it, a surgeon who had buried her whole crew got ready to keep a promise that was going to cost her the last family she had left. There is a stretch of that long run for the rim that the official archive almost lost, and Quill has always thought it was the most important stretch of all, because it was the part where the galaxy stopped watching a relic and started watching a war. Iron Verdict cured the first world and ran for the second, and the Concord, scrambling, threw a blockade across the only fast lane the relic could take. 40 cutters, the quickest hulls the quarantine service owned, strung across the lane in a net, with orders not to fire but to physically bar the relic's path, to ram it if they had to do anything that would slow the corpse long enough for the council to decide what the corpse actually was. Their commander was a young officer named Said Lur, and Said Lur had grown up on a rimward world, and Said Lur had family on the 3rd planet on the relic's course, family scheduled to burn in 9 hours. Quill has the channel logs. He has listened to them many times. The young officer hailed the relic, voice tight, and recited the order to halt, and Etta Forstall answered her, not as an enemy, but as a surgeon talking to a frightened family member in a waiting room, which is what the young officer was. "You have people on Holland's Vale," Etta said. It was not a question. The ship had pulled the officer's service record the moment she hailed. "Your mother. 2 siblings. They are scheduled for the 2nd burn, in 9 hours." The young officer did not answer for a moment. Then, very quietly, "How do you know that?" "Because I read it. The same way your council read it when they decided to set them on fire and call it mercy." Etta's voice did not soften, but it did not harden either. "Move your net, officer. I am going to Holland's Vale. I am going to cure it. Your mother and your siblings are going to be alive at the end of today, and the only thing standing between them and that is 40 cutters and an order written by men who have never met them. Move the net. Let me save your family." Quill has always marveled at what happened next, because it was the first crack in the wall, the first time a Concord officer chose the surgeon over the order. Said Lur held the channel open for 11 seconds. Then she gave a command, and it was not the command her orders contained. She opened the net. She moved 40 cutters aside and made a lane, and as Iron Verdict came through she fell in beside it, escort instead of blockade, and she rode with the relic all the way down to Holland's Vale and watched from orbit as the great pale gun pulsed twice and the bloom died across the world where her family lived. Her mother survived. Her siblings survived, and Saidi Lur was court-martialed for it, stripped of her commission, and she stood in front of the tribunal and said a thing that ended up mattering more than the verdict. "You can take my rank," she told them. "My family is alive. I would do it again with my last breath. The relic saved them in 2 pulses, and you were going to burn them in 1. If choosing the people I love over your protocol is a crime, then your protocol is the crime, and I am proud to be guilty of it." The tribunal convicted her. The recording of her statement spread to 900 worlds in a day, and by the time the relic reached the center of the arc, there were quarantine officers all across Concord space, quietly asking themselves the same question the young officer had asked, the question that was beginning to come apart the entire architecture of 400 years of fire, whose family is on the next world, and who am I to burn them when a corpse can cure them in 9 seconds? That was what Iron Verdict really did on the run for the Rim. It cured worlds, yes, but more than that, it taught a galaxy of careful, obedient officers to look at the people under the fire and see their own faces, and once a quarantine service starts doing that, it stops being a quarantine service and becomes something the Council can no longer aim. The 4th world the relic reached was different, and Quill records it carefully, because it was the world that taught even the surgeon something she had not known. It was called Marrow's End, and it was the worst infected world in the Rimward Third, so far gone that the Bloom had been managing it instead of the other way around for 2 years. The standing statues of spore covered whole cities. The air itself was gray. The Concord had written Marrow's End off so completely that it was not even on the burn schedule. It was simply considered already dead, a world to be ignored until the Bloom finished it. Etta Forstall looked at the readouts as the relic came over the horizon and went quiet for a long moment. "Surgeon," said the ship, gently, "you are thinking we should pass it. It is the worst case. The agent works best on early infection. On a world this far gone, the cure will be slower, harder, and it will spend more of our reserve than a clean world would. Pure arithmetic says skip Marrow's End and save 2 cleaner worlds with the same dose." "I know what the arithmetic says," Etta said. "And?" Etta Forstall looked at the gray dead world turning under them, the world the Council had already given up on, the world so far gone that even the rescuer was being asked to give up on it, and she made the choice that, Quill thinks, was the whole of who she was. "We do not pass the worst case," she said. "We never pass the worst case. That is the entire reason this ship exists. The Council's arithmetic is what got the galaxy into the fire. The moment I start doing their arithmetic, deciding which worlds are too far gone to bother with, I become them. I will not become them. Take us down. We cure Marrow's End. We cure it first, before any clean world, precisely because it is the hardest, because the hardest is where the surrender always starts." End quote. The relic went down over Marrow's End, and the gun pulsed, and it was slower, and it was harder, and it did spend more of the reserve, exactly as the ship had warned. It took 4 pulses instead of 2, but the gray air cleared, and the standing statues crumbled into harmless dust, and on the worst infected world in the Rimward Third, the people who had been waiting 2 years to die walked out of their sealed shelters into clean air. And the recording of that, the worst case cured, the world even the rescuer was told to abandon, was the recording that broke Counselor Mash in the end, because it proved the one thing he had built his life on denying, that there was no such thing as too far gone, that the only thing that had ever been too far gone was the Council's willingness to try. The Sable-Mark Concord spent the next 6 hours trying to decide whether to thank the human warship or kill it, and managed to do neither, which was the most honest thing the Council had done in years. Quill was in the hall the whole time. He watched the High Assembly come apart along an old seam. On one side stood Counselor Maish and the architects of the Mercy Protocol, who had built their entire careers on the certainty that the Bloom could not be cured, and who now had to choose between admitting they were wrong and pretending the relic was a trick. On the other side stood a smaller, quieter faction who had been outvoted for years, the ones who had always thought burning their own worlds was a confession of failure dressed as courage. They were not quiet anymore. "It cured a world," said an old delegate named Asun, who had lost a daughter world to an early burn and had never forgiven the assembly for it. 2 pulses. We watched it. The spore count is at 0 across the entire surface, and the population is alive. Alive, Monesh. Not quarantined. Not sacrificed. Alive. And you want to convene a committee to discuss whether the relic is real. Maesha's face was gray. "If the cure is real," he said slowly, "then everything we have done for 400 years was unnecessary. Every world we burned, every billion we wrote off as mercy. If a relic can do in 2 pulses what we said could not be done at all." He stopped. He could not finish the sentence. No one in that hall could finish that sentence, because the end of it was a confession too large to say out loud. So they did what frightened powerful people do. They sent the relic a demand. Iron Verdict received it 3 worlds later, with 6 doses of cure remaining, and the ship already beginning the long, quiet preparation for the thing it intended to do. The demand was simple, and it was vicious in the way only a bureaucracy can be vicious. The sable-marked Concorde ordered the human vessel to cease all unauthorized atmospheric seeding immediately, to surrender to the nearest quarantine authority, and to hand over the counteragent and all technical data for proper evaluation by the appropriate scientific bodies. Pending that evaluation, which would take an estimated 3 to 5 years, the Rimward worlds would remain under quarantine, and the Mercy Protocol would proceed on its original schedule. Etta Forstall read the demand twice. Then she laughed, and it was the first time she had laughed since she woke up, and it was not a kind laugh. 3 to 5 years, she said. They want me to stop curing worlds and hand them the cure so they can study it for 3 to 5 years while they burn the Rimward Third on schedule anyway. She shook her head slowly. They are not afraid the cure is fake. They are afraid it is real. A fake cure they could dismiss. A real cure means every fire they ever lit was a murder. That is a precise diagnosis, said the ship. I am a surgeon. She keyed the channel. Get me whoever wrote this. Not a clerk. The one who decided. It took 20 minutes, and then she was looking at Counselor Maish, silver and proud and frightened, across 900 years and 400 light years, and she said something to him that Quill has in his archive and considers the truest thing said in the whole affair. You did not invent the hard choice. Etta Forstall told the counselor. We made it too. 900 years ago, we burned our own worlds, exactly like you, and we called it mercy, exactly like you, and we were exactly as proud of our courage as you are of yours. And then one of us asked a simple question that none of you have ever let yourselves ask. We asked, what if the reason we cannot cure it is that we stopped trying the moment burning became easier? And we went back and we tried. And it took us 40 terrible years, and we lost good people, and at the end of it we had this. She held up the vial, small and cold and pale, on the screen, for the counselor to see. We had the thing in my hand, the thing you are asking me to give you so you can put it in a drawer for 5 years while you burn 4 billion people on schedule. I am not going to do that, counselor. I am going to use it. Stand aside, or do not. It will not matter. Maesha's mouth worked. You cannot save all 80 worlds, he said, and there was something almost pleading in it, as if he needed her to fail to make his whole life make sense. Our own analysts have your seeding rate. You do not carry enough agent. You will save a handful and the rest will burn anyway, and you will have proven nothing except that you could not finish what you started. We at least have the courage to finish. You will run out and fly home and leave them to us. There was a silence on the channel. Etta Forstall looked at the counselor for a long moment, and Quill, watching the archive, has always thought he saw the exact instant she decided not to tell him. She could have told him what the ship was about to do. She could have explained the math, the single impossible pulse, the price. She chose not to. She chose to let him believe, for a few more hours, that the relic would run out and fail, because she had taken his measure and decided he had not earned the truth. We will see, is all she said, and she closed the channel. She turned back to the bulkhead. "How long until you are ready?" "4 hours to position," said the ship. "We must reach the gravitational center of the rimward arc. From there a single pulse can be shaped to cross all 80 worlds in one pass. Closer in, the cure thins too far before it reaches the edges. We have to stand at the heart of them and pulse outward through all of them at once. And to shape a pulse that large, I have to put everything into it," the ship said simply. "Every reactor, every cell, the skin that nothing can breach, I have to spend that too, all of it, channeled into one shaped pulse. For about 9 seconds I will be the brightest thing in this arm of the galaxy, and then I will be cold iron, and I will not wake again." Etta Forstall sat down on the deck of her medical bay, slowly, the way old people sit. Though she was not old, she had just buried a great deal. She put her back against the bulkhead so that she was touching the ship, and she stayed there for a while, and the ship let her, because some things you do not rush a surgeon through. "Tell me about the crew," she said finally. "Before we do this, I never let myself. Tell me who I buried to be here." And the ship, who had kept vigil over all of them for 9 centuries, told her. It named them, all of them, the whole crew of Iron Verdict, the gunners and the cooks and the navigators and the young ones who had signed on at the very end of the war, thinking they were joining a relief mission and not a 40-year siege against a plague. The ship told her how each of them had died, quietly, in the cold, over the long centuries, one pod failure at a time, while she slept and the galaxy forgot them. It told her the small things, who had hummed at their station, who had been afraid of the dark and slept with a light, who had a child waiting on a world that was dust now too. Etta Forstall listened to all of it, and she cried, finally, the grief she had refused herself when she woke, and the ship let her have it, and outside the hull 77 worlds turned in the dark, not knowing how close they had come to the fire, and one gray relic ran for the center of them carrying a surgeon and a vial and a promise. When she was done, she wiped her face and stood up. "All right," she said, "I have one thing left to do before the pulse, and you are not going to like it, and you are going to do it anyway, because I am the surgeon and you are the ship, and that is how this works." "I am listening," said the ship. "You are going to put me off." She said it flatly, the way she had said the worst diagnoses. No softening, because softening is a cruelty. "Before the pulse, you will launch the medical shuttle with me in it, far enough out to ride the edge of the wave and live. And then you will fire without me." The ship was silent for a long moment. When it spoke, there was something in its voice that Quill, hearing the archive later, could only call love, the strange iron love of a machine for the last living member of its family. "No," said the ship. "That was not a request." "I know," said the ship. "And the answer is still no, and I will tell you why, surgeon. Because you have always deserved the truth, and I will not start lying to you in the last hour. If I put you off, you will live, and the cure will reach 80 worlds, and you will have done a thing no other living being has ever done, and you will spend the rest of your life as the last human, alone, the only one of us left, carried around the Concorde as a relic, exactly the way they carried me. They will put a velvet rope across your life. You will become an exhibit. I have watched them do it to me for 900 years, and I will not let them do it to you." Etta Forstall stared at the bulkhead. "So you have a better idea," she said. "You have had it the whole time. You let me grieve the crew, and you let me think I was sending myself away, and the whole time you had a better idea." "I had a better idea," the ship agreed, "and it is also the true reason your design said to wake only the surgeon, only the one who knows how to finish it. You assumed that was about the cure. It was not only about the cure." End quote. The ship paused. It was about who would be left to carry it. "Sit down, Etta. Let me tell you what we are actually going to do, and then let me tell you the part of the math I did not show you, the part you did not ask the right question to find." And in the heart of a warship the whole galaxy had laughed at, with 3 hours left before the brightest pulse in the history of that arm of stars, the old ship finally told its surgeon the last secret it had been keeping for 900 years, and Edda Forstall began, very slowly, to smile. The people on the cured worlds did not, at first, understand what had happened to them, and Quill collected their accounts for years afterward, because the accounts told a truth the Council never could. On the first world, a farmer named Olun had sealed his family in a root cellar for 9 days as the gray air thickened, certain they would suffocate or starve before the quarantine fleet came to burn them, which was the only ending anyone on the rim expected anymore. He had stopped explaining to his children why the air had turned. There was no explaining it. He had only held them in the dark and waited. And then, on the 9th day, the seal on the cellar door had cracked of its own accord because the pressure outside had changed, and Olun had climbed up expecting the fire and found instead a clear blue sky and a smell he had forgotten the world could have, the smell of clean wet earth, and a single fading streak of pale gold light still hanging high in the atmosphere where the relic's pulse had passed. He did not know it was a relic. He did not know about the Council, or the Mercy Protocol, or the Surgeon, or the 9 doses, or the velvet rope. He knew only that the death had come for his children, and something had reached down out of the sky and taken the death away and asked him for nothing, not even his name. He told Quill, years later, that he had stood in the field with his children and wept, and that he had spent every day since trying to be the kind of man who deserved a sky that clean, and that he had never found out what to call the thing that saved him, and so in his house they simply called it the gold, and they were not the only house on that world that did. There were 10,000 stories like Olun's, one for every shelter and cellar and sealed room on 80 worlds, and the Council had no category for any of them, because the Council's records measured worlds and populations and protocols, and had never once had a line for a farmer weeping in a clean field over children who were supposed to be ash. That was the gap the surgeon had stepped into, not the gap in the science, the gap in the seeing. The Council had stopped seeing the farmers a long time ago, somewhere around the 400th burned world, because you cannot burn what you let yourself keep seeing. The relic saw them. That was the whole of its weapon, in the end, the thing the velvet rope had been hung across without anyone understanding what it really was. A machine that had been built by a people who refused, to the last, to stop seeing the ones under the fire. While the relic ran for the rim, the sable-marked Concord did something it had not done in 400 years, and Quill, who was inside the hall for all of it, recorded the unraveling of a certainty. The High Assembly had built its whole self on a single load-bearing belief, that the Whitlung bloom could not be cured, only managed, and that anyone who claimed otherwise was a fool or a fraud. 4 centuries of policy rested on that belief. 611 burned worlds rested on it. The careers of every counselor in the hall rested on it. And now a relic was curing worlds on a live feed, 2 pulses at a time, and the belief was cracking under the weight of the evidence, and the sound it made as it cracked was the sound of 400 powerful people discovering that their life's work might have been a 4-century-long mistake. Some of them could not bear the weight of it, and Quill watched what they did with the unbearable. They reached for any explanation that let the belief survive. The cure was a trick. The relic was faking the readouts. The worlds had not really been infected. The humans had some secret agenda. A counselor named Threll stood up in the hall and argued, with real conviction, that the relic was a weapon of psychological warfare, that the cured worlds would turn out to be poisoned in some subtler way, that the Concord must not under any circumstances adopt a cure it did not understand from a corpse it could not trust. He was clever, and he was frightened, and he was wrong, and for a few hours a good portion of the hall believed him, because believing him meant the burning had been necessary after all. But the readouts kept coming, world after world, the spore count dropping to 0, the populations alive, the air clean. The cured worlds did not turn out to be poisoned. The children who had been statues of spore turned out to be children again, and one by one the counselors who had reached for Threll's explanation had to let go of it, because there is only so long even a frightened, powerful person can argue with a world full of living children. The faction led by Old Osun grew with every cured world. Osun had lost a daughter world to an early burn 40 years before, and had spent his whole career as a voice in the wilderness, outvoted, ignored, the council's resident inconvenience. Now, for the first time, the wilderness was filling up. Delegates who had voted for the Mercy Protocol a week earlier crossed the floor to stand with him, not because they had grown brave overnight, but because the evidence had finally grown louder than their fear. Osun did not gloat. Quill watched him receive the defectors one by one, and to each he said the same quiet thing. "I am not glad to be right. I would have given anything to have been wrong 40 years ago. But we are here now. Let us at least be here honestly." The honesty, when it came, was brutal. The assembly convened a full accounting, the first in its history, and Quill recorded the numbers as they were read into the record, and the reading took the better part of a day because the numbers were so large. 611 worlds burned, 340 billion citizens cleansed in the name of mercy across 4 centuries, and against that, the single line that ended the meeting: 1 relic, 1 surgeon, 1 cure, 80 worlds saved in 9 seconds, and the cure free for the asking the entire time. Had anyone thought to look for it? A counselor named Vane, young, who had never burned anything because she had only just taken her seat, asked the question that the whole assembly had been avoiding, and Quill has it in the archive as the moment the council finally grew up. "How did we not look?" Vane said. 400 years, 10,000 researchers, resources beyond counting, and a surgeon on a single ship found the cure in 40 years, with a fraction of what we have. How did we, with all of it, not even look? It was Mazish, in the end, who answered her, and he answered her from the floor of the Ark, by channel, because he was out there with the fleet that had just ceased firing on the relic, and his voice came into the hall cracked and stripped of all its old certainty. "Because looking would have meant admitting it was possible," Majesh said, "and if it was possible, then every world we had already burned was a murder. The burning was not just a policy, it was a confession we could not afford to make. So we stopped looking, not because the cure was impossible, but because finding it would have cost us our innocence, and we valued our innocence more than 400 years of the lives we fed to the fire to protect it." A long pause. "I am looking now, Counselor Vane. For the first time in my life I am looking, and I am ashamed of every year I did not." The accounting changed the Concord. Quill watched it happen over the years that followed, the slow rebuilding of a civilization that had finally admitted its central wound. The Mercy Protocol was not merely struck from the books. It was studied, in the academies, as the definitive case of how a fear can wear the mask of a virtue for centuries, and how an entire wise and powerful people can mistake their own surrender for courage. The young learned it the way the young learn the great mistakes, so as not to repeat them. And at the center of the teaching, always, was the relic and the surgeon and the simple devastating fact that the cure had been free the whole time, and the only thing that had ever stood between the galaxy and that cure was the galaxy's own unwillingness to ask whether the fire was really the only way. The science itself was almost humble when they finally understood it. The students expected the human cure to be some exotic, impossible thing, a technology centuries beyond the Concord's reach. It was not. It was patient. The humans, in their 40-year war against the rot, had not found a magic bullet. They had found a method, a long, slow, disciplined method of culturing a counter-organism that hunted the spore the way a careful predator hunts a careful prey, and they had refined it over 4 decades of failure and loss until it worked, and then they had built one ship to carry it that could survive long enough to deliver it. The genius was not in the cure. The genius was in the refusal to stop. That was the thing the Concord, with all its researchers, had never possessed, and it was the thing the surgeon taught them, more than any culture or method, not how to make the cure, but how to keep going long enough to find it. The sable-marked Concord assembled its entire core fleet at the heart of the Rimward Arc, 1,100 warships, to stop one relic from doing something they did not understand, and Quill went with them, because the Council wanted a witness, and Quill was the witness the Council trusted. He had a place on the flag bridge of the lead vessel. He could see the whole sphere of the fleet around him, 1,100 white hulls hanging in formation against the dark, the largest concentration of force the Concorde had mustered in a century, all of it aimed inward at a single gray dot drifting toward the gravitational center of 80 doomed worlds. Admiral Veth Corrin had been recalled and given command, and Quill could see in the old officer's face that he did not want to be there, that he had watched the relic cure a world with his own sensors and now had to point his fleet at it on orders from a council that had not. Counselor Maish spoke to the fleet over the open channel, and his voice had hardened back into certainty, because frightened men reach for certainty the way drowning men reach for stone. The relic intends a single act, Maish said. Our analysts agree. It is moving to the center of the arc to attempt a mass seeding. They will tell you it is mercy. It is not. We do not know what that pulse will do to 80 worlds at once. We do not know what it will do to this fleet. An untested human weapon of unknown design, fired at scale, in the middle of our own space. We managed this plague for 400 years with discipline and sacrifice. We will not stake 4 billion lives on the word of a corpse. The relic will halt and surrender the agent, or the fleet will stop it. Those are the only two outcomes. Quill recorded the speech. He also recorded what came back. Edda Forstall's voice, tired now but steady, the steadiness of someone who has stopped being afraid because she has already decided. Counselor, she said, you keep saying you managed the plague for 400 years. I want you to hear what that sentence actually means, because I do not think you have ever let yourself hear it. In 400 years of managing, how many worlds did you burn? Your own records say 611. 611 worlds. Hundreds of billions of your own people fed into the fire because you decided the cure could not exist and stopped looking. That is not management, Counselor. That is the longest act of surrender in the history of this galaxy, and you dressed it in medals. A pause. I am at the center now. I am about to undo as much of it as I still can. You can fire on me. 1,100 ships could not scratch my hull, and neither could 300, and you know that, because your admiral watched it splash. So fire. It changes nothing. The pulse goes out either way. Then you leave us no choice, said Mashish. No, Edda said. You never had a choice. You just never noticed. Watch what one ship you laughed at is about to do, Counselor, and then go home and tell your cameras why you tried to stop it. Veth Corrin gave the order because he was a soldier, and the order was lawful, and 1,100 ships fired on iron verdict at the center of the arc. Quill watched it. The barrage was beyond anything he had ever seen or will ever see again, a converging storm of fire from every direction at once, enough to vaporize a fleet, all of it falling inward on a single gray relic. And it splashed, the same way. The fire ran around the unseen shell and sheeted off into the dark and died, and iron verdict did not move, did not turn, did not so much as roll, because it was busy. Its main gun was opening, wider than it had opened for any single world, the great pale aperture spreading like an eye coming fully awake, and deep inside the hull a light was building that hurt to look at even through the filters. Admiral, said a sensor officer, his voice climbing, its reactor output it has passed every limit we have a number for. It is dumping everything, hull integrity, shields, drive, all of it, into the gun. It is not defending itself anymore. It is putting its whole self into one shot. Veth Corrin understood first. Quill saw it cross the old admiral's face, the understanding, and then something that might have been grief. It is not a weapon, Veth Corrin said quietly. It was never a weapon. Cease fire, all ships. We are shooting at a thing that is trying to save us. His voice cracked on the order, but he gave it. Cease fire and stand off. Let it work. Some ships obeyed, some did not, because Maish countermanded him, screaming now over the channel that the pulse was untested, that they did not know what it would do, that this was exactly the recklessness that had killed the humans in the first place. And in that confusion, with the fleet half firing and half frozen, Iron Verdict spoke one last time to the galaxy that had laughed at it, and it was the ship's voice, not the surgeons, deep and ancient and almost gentle. "You hung a rope across my gun," the ship said, "and you were right to. This was never meant to be fired twice. It was meant to be fired once, when it mattered most, by people brave enough to spend everything to keep a promise. We are those people. We always were. Watch." Iron verdict fired. Quill has tried, in the official archive, to describe the pulse, and he has always failed, and he has come to believe the failure is correct, that some things are not meant to fit into a record. The whole arm of the galaxy went pale gold. For 9 seconds the relic was the brightest object Quill had ever seen, brighter than the local star, a single-shaped wave of cure rolling outward in a perfect expanding sphere, crossing the void faster than the eye could follow, washing over world after world after world. 80 worlds. The pulse reached every one of them in a single pass, exactly as the ship had said it would, a tide of pale gold light breaking across 80 atmospheres at once. And on 80 worlds, the bloom died. The sensor officers on 1,100 ships watched their readouts and could not speak. The spore count on every rimward world dropped toward 0 in the same instant, the gray felt-lung death loosening its grip on 4 billion people at the same moment. The standing statues of spore that had been someone's children crumbling into harmless dust. The air going clean, the worlds going clean, all of them, all at once, 80 worlds cured in 9 seconds by a relic the Concorde had kept on a velvet rope for 900 years. And then the light went out. Iron verdict hung at the center of the ark, dark and cold and still, its gun open and dead, its reactors silent, its unbreakable skin spent down to ordinary gray iron at last. The brightest thing in that arm of the galaxy was, in 9 seconds, the deadest. 1,100 Concorde warships drifted around the corpse of the relic that had just saved their species, and not one of them fired again, and the channel was silent, and even Maish had stopped screaming. Quill, on the flag bridge, found that he was standing. He did not remember standing. "Hail it," said Admiral Veth Corin, very quietly. "Someone hail the relic. There was a surgeon aboard. Find out if she is alive." There was no answer. The relic was dark. No reactor, no power, no signal, nothing. The ship that had kept vigil for 900 years had spent its last breath on 80 worlds and gone where its crew had gone. And then, from the dark hull, a single small thing detached. A shuttle. The medical shuttle of Iron Verdict, drifting clear of the dead warship on a cold ballistic arc, its running lights coming up one at a time, the way the warship's lights had come up in the museum, small and amber and alive. It had launched in the last second before the pulse, riding the very edge of the wave, exactly far enough out to live. Veth Corin closed his eyes. "She got off," he said. "The surgeon. The ship put her off." But the shuttle's hail, when it came through, was not the surgeon's voice. It was the ship. Quill froze. The whole flag bridge froze, because Iron Verdict was a dark corpse at the center of the arc. 1,100 sensor returns confirmed it. The warship was cold dead iron, and yet the ship's voice was coming clear and warm and unhurried out of a tiny medical shuttle drifting in the void. "You are confused," the ship said. To the fleet, to the council listening light years away, to Quill. "Let me clear it up, because the surgeon asked me to, and because you have earned at least this much by ceasing fire when it counted. The warship you are looking at was never the ship. It was the body. A body can be spent. A body should be spent when the moment is large enough. But a body is not a person." A pause, and something almost like warmth. The person rode out in the shuttle. "With the surgeon. We left the body behind on purpose. We always meant to. That is what it was for." Inside the shuttle, Etta Forstall sat with her hand flat against a small bulkhead, the way she had touched the warship, the way she touched a patient's chest, and the same deep voice answered the small warmth of her palm. She was not alone. She had never, in the end, been going to be alone. That was the last secret, the part of the math she had not asked the right question to find, the real reason the design had said to wake only the surgeon. Not because the surgeon would die at the gun, but because the surgeon was the one who would carry the ship home. 80 worlds, Etta Forstall said softly, to the voice in the wall. We kept the promise. We kept the promise, the ship agreed. All of it. Every world. Not 9, not a handful. All 80. They said you would run out and fly home, and leave them to the fire. Instead, you cured every one of them in a single pass, and they will be telling that story for as long as there are throats to tell it. A pause. How do you feel, surgeon? Etta Forstall looked out the small port at the 80 worlds turning clean in the dark, and at the 1,100 warships that had tried to stop her and failed, and at the dead gray body of the warship that had carried her family for 900 years and spent itself to the last for strangers who had laughed at it. Tired, she said, and not alone. Take us home, wherever home is now. Home is wherever we decide it is, said the ship. We are the last of us, you and I, the body and the surgeon. Let us go find a quiet world and grow more of the cure, the way it was always meant to be grown, in a proper lab over years, so the next time a galaxy starts reaching for the fire instead of the work, there is enough. A pause. And Etta, one more thing. Yes? They will come after us, the Concord. Not to fight, to beg. They will want the cure, the science, the lab. They will offer you anything. A seat on their council, a statue, a velvet rope across your whole life. The ship's voice was very dry. What do you want me to tell them? Etta Forstall, surgeon, last human, sole survivor of Iron Verdict, looked at the 80 living worlds one more time and gave the only battle order she would ever give, and it was not a battle order at all. Tell them the cure is free, she said. Tell them it was always free. Tell them all they ever had to do was choose the work over the fire, and they can start choosing it now. And tell them, she almost smiled, tell them to take the rope off the next relic they find. You never know what is still alive inside the things you stop being afraid of. The sable-marked Concord came after the surgeon exactly the way the ship had said they would, not with guns, but with delegations, and the first one arrived at the quiet world within a month and brought a velvet box. Quill was in that first delegation. He had asked to be. After the arc, after the 9 seconds of gold light, after watching a relic spend itself to cure 80 worlds the council had been hours from burning, Quill had found that the official archive he kept no longer felt like enough. He wanted to see the surgeon with his own eyes. He wanted to stand in front of the last human and understand a thing he could not yet name. The quiet world she had chosen was small, and green, and nameless, far enough out that the Concord's maps barely marked it. Etta Forstall had set down on it with the medical shuttle and the dark, cold body of Iron Verdict, which she had towed there herself over the slow weeks, because she would not leave the body drifting at the center of the arc as a monument for tourists. She had landed the great gray hull in a wide green valley and let the grass grow up around it, and she had built a small lab in its shadow, and she had begun, exactly as the ship had said, to grow more of the cure. The delegation found her in the lab. She was older now in the way that grief ages a person quickly and then stops. A small upright woman with steady hands, and she did not stand when the counselors filed in, because she was in the middle of a culture and surgeons do not abandon a delicate thing for the sake of important visitors. The lead delegate opened the velvet box. Inside was the highest honor the sable-marked Concord possessed, a seat on the High Assembly, offered to a human for the first and only time in history. The delegate made a long speech. He spoke of gratitude, of the 80 worlds, of the 4 billion lives, of the Concord's profound and humble wish to make amends, to honor her, to give her a place at the very center of galactic power where her wisdom could guide them all. Etta Forstall let him finish. Then she put down her instrument, wiped her hands, and looked at the velvet box for a long moment. You put my ship on a velvet rope for 900 years, she said, and now you want to put me on one. A seat at the center, a place of honor, an exhibit. She shook her head, almost gently. I have watched what your honors do, counselor. You honored the Mercy Protocol. You gave medals to the men who burned 611 worlds. Your honors are how you stop looking at things. I will not be honored. I will be useful. There is a difference, and your council has spent 400 years forgetting it." She closed the velvet box and pushed it back across the table. "Here is what you may have instead," she said. "The cure. All of it. The science, the cultures, the method. Free, with no conditions, given to anyone who asks. I have spent the month writing it down in language your researchers can follow. Take it, grow it, stop burning worlds. That is the whole of what I want from you, and it is the whole of what you may have from me. Not my presence on your council, not my face in your archive. The work, only the work." There was a long silence in the lab. The delegates had not expected to be refused. People are not usually refused when they offer a seat at the center of the galaxy. It was Councillor Maiesh, in the end, who broke the silence, and his presence in that delegation was itself the most remarkable thing about it. He had come, the architect of the Mercy Protocol, the man who had laughed up at the relic under the cameras, the man who had ordered 1,100 ships to fire on the surgeon, had asked to be in the delegation, and the council had let him because no one quite knew what else to do with him. He was not silver and proud anymore. The month had taken something out of him. He stepped forward, and he did not make a speech, and Quill recorded what he said, because Quill understood, even then, that it was the most important thing in the room. "I burned a world," Maiesh said, 40 years ago, before I was a counselor. I was a young quarantine officer, and I gave the order to cleanse a world called Sethra's Reach, because the bloom had touched its northern continent, and the protocol was clear. 200 million people. I told myself it was mercy. I have told myself that every day for 40 years. He stopped. His hands were shaking. "And then I watched you cure 80 worlds in 9 seconds with a relic I laughed at. And I understood that Sethra's Reach did not have to die, that none of them had to die, that I was not brave. I was only afraid, and I called the fear courage, and I taught a whole council to do the same." He looked at her, and his eyes were wet. "I do not want a place on your council either, surgeon. I want to know how to grow the cure. I want to spend whatever I have left growing it. I want to undo even 1% of what I did. That is all. That is the only thing I have left that I want." Etta Forstall looked at the old counselor for a long time. And then she did the thing that Quill thinks was the truest measure of her, the thing that separated her forever from the council that had laughed. She did not forgive him, because forgiveness was not hers to give for 200 million dead, but she did not turn him away either. "Sit down," she said. "Wash your hands first. The cultures are delicate." She pushed a stool toward him with her foot. "If you want to spend what is left growing the cure, you may start now. There is more work than I can do alone, and the ship and I are only 2, and the galaxy is very large." She glanced at the dark gray hull lying in the grass outside the window, the body of iron verdict gone green at the edges where the world had begun to claim it. "We could use the hands, even old guilty ones, especially those, maybe. They tend to work harder." Maiesh washed his hands, and he sat down. And the architect of the Mercy Protocol spent the last years of his life in a small lab in the shadow of a human warship, growing the cure to the plague he had spent his career burning worlds to manage, under the eye of the surgeon who had proven him wrong, and Quill has always thought that was a stranger and truer ending than any honor in any velvet box could ever have been. There is one more piece of the story that the official archive carries, and it is the piece Quill himself returns to most often, because it is the piece that taught him what the surgeon had actually meant when she chose the word listen for her stone. It happened years after the Ark, when the cure was everywhere, and the green world had grown into a school, and a delegation of a different kind arrived. Not from the Sable-Mark Concord this time, from beyond it. From the Thren Compact, a power that bordered Concord space along the far rim, a people the Concord had warred with on and off for centuries, old enemies, and the Thren had a plague of their own now, a thing that was not the bloom, but rhymed with it, a new gray death creeping through their worlds, and they had heard, the way news travels, that on a quiet green world there lived a surgeon who could not be made to stop curing things. The Thren delegation came armed, because that was how the Thren came, and they came suspicious, because the Concorde and the Thren had spent 300 years teaching each other to be suspicious, and they expected to have to bargain hard for the cure, to trade, to threaten, to pay in territory or weapons or oaths. They did not understand the surgeon. No one ever understood the surgeon the first time. Etta Forstall was very old by then. She met them in the grass, in the shadow of the gray hull, with the grass grown through the gun, and she listened to their long, careful speech about what they were prepared to offer in exchange for the human cure, and when they were finished, she said the same thing she had said to the Concorde, the thing she said to everyone, the thing the ship had told her to say to anyone who came reaching. "The cure is free," she said. "It was always free. You did not need to come armed, and you did not need to come ready to bargain. You needed only to come and ask, and you have asked, so it is yours. Sit down, wash your hands. The cultures are delicate." The Thren did not believe her at first. People who have spent 300 years bargaining for everything do not know what to do when something is simply given. They kept trying to pay. They offered territory. She declined it. They offered weapons. She declined those harder. They offered an alliance against the Concorde, their mutual old enemy, and at that one the surgeon laughed her dry laugh and said the thing Quill keeps closest of all. "You want me to help you make war on the Concorde," she said, "in exchange for the cure to your plague. Let me tell you what I learned a long time ago, on a ship full of people I had to bury. The plague is not your enemy. The Concorde is not your enemy. Your enemy is the part of you that reaches for the fire instead of the work, the part that would rather burn a world than admit you do not yet know how to save it, the part that would rather make war on an old foe than do the slow, patient thing that actually heals. That part lives in the Thren, and it lives in the Concorde, and it lived in my own people too, 900 years ago, until we beat it. The cure to your plague is free. The cure to the other thing, the thing that makes a people reach for fire, that one you have to grow yourselves, and it takes longer, and it is harder, and no surgeon can pulse it into your atmosphere from orbit. You have to choose it, every day, forever. That is the only cure that was ever expensive. The Thren took the cure. They took it free, in the end, because the surgeon would not let them pay for it, and they went home and grew it and saved their worlds. And something Quill did not expect happened in the years after, something the surgeon had perhaps expected all along. The Thren and the Concorde, who had warred for 300 years, stopped warring, not because of a treaty, because both of them had now stood in the grass in the shadow of a human warship and been given, free, the thing they had each been most afraid of needing, and it is very hard to keep making war on a neighbor once you have both knelt in the same valley and been healed by the same dry old woman who would not let either of you pay. The cure spread further than its makers ever planned. It cured plagues, and then it cured a border war, and Quill has always thought that was the part the humans would have been proudest of, though there were no humans left to be proud except the one in the valley and the voice in the hull. The ship and the surgeon never explained themselves beyond that. They never wrote a manifesto, never founded a religion, never let anyone build them a monument larger than a small stone in the grass. When students asked the old ship why the humans had not used the cure to rule, to take the galaxy that had laughed at them and bind it to a debt it could never repay, the ship always gave the same answer, and Quill has it in the archive in the ship's deep, patient voice. "Because we had already been the kind of people who used a thing like this to rule," the ship said. "In the very worst years of our own war, before the surgeon's question, there were humans who wanted to hoard the early cure, to ration it, to use the dying as leverage, to make of a plague a throne. We were not always good. No people is always good. But we lost so much in those years, we buried so many, that by the end we had burned the wanting to rule out of ourselves the way the cure burns out the spore. What was left was only the work. So when we woke up here, in a galaxy reaching for the fire, we did not want the throne it would have given us. We wanted to put the fire out and grow more cure, and tell the young the names of our dead, and then go quiet. That is all a people is, in the end, once it has paid enough. Not a power, a memory of what it cost, kept alive long enough to spare someone else the same bill." Quill recorded that, and he has played it for the young more than any other piece, more even than the lights coming on inside the dead ship, because it is the answer to the question the lights only ask. The lights ask, how do you know what is still alive inside the things you have stopped being afraid of? And the ship's answer about the work, about the wanting to rule, burned out, and only the work left, is the closest the archive ever comes to telling them, you know by what it does once it wakes. A thing that wakes, and reaches for a throne, was a weapon all along. A thing that wakes and reaches for the dying, free, asking nothing, that was something else. Something the galaxy had a velvet rope across and a plaque on, and a 400-year habit of laughing at, and it had been the most alive thing in the room the entire time. The young still do not always understand it, but they leave the valley different than they came, every one of them, and that, Quill has decided in his long old age, is the truest monument the surgeon and her ship could have wanted. Not a statue, not a seat, not a velvet rope, but a galaxy full of healers who once sat in the grass, in the shadow of a gray hull, and learned that the corpse was alive, and the joke was on the ones who laughed, and the only cure that ever mattered was the courage to keep looking for one. The cure spread. That was the part the official archive could measure, and Quill measured it carefully, because the numbers mattered. Within a year, the Sable-Mark Concord had grown enough counter-agent to seed every quarantined world in its space. Within 3 years, the Whitlung Bloom, which had been the great unbeatable terror of the galaxy for 4 centuries, was a manageable nuisance, then a rarity, then a thing the young had only read about. The Mercy Protocol was struck from the books. The quarantine fleets were retasked to carry cure instead of fire. The Hall of Quaint Antiquities was quietly renamed and rebuilt, and the empty cradle where the relic had hung for 900 years was left empty on purpose, with a new plaque beneath it, and the new plaque did not say non-functional. The new plaque said, it was alive the whole time, we simply stopped listening. Quill went back to the quiet green world many times over the years to update his archive, and the surgeon let him, because she had decided he was a witness who told the truth, and the truth was the only thing she had ever cared about preserving. He watched the small lab grow into a school. He watched young researchers from 100 worlds come to learn the method, to put their hands in the cultures, to sit in the shadow of the gray hull and listen to the old ship tell them, in its deep, patient voice, about the 40 terrible years of the human war against the rot, and how it had been won, not with a weapon, but with a question no one had been brave enough to ask. Because the ship was still there. That was the part Quill could never quite fit into the official archive, the part that lived only in the unofficial one, the one he kept for himself. The body of Iron Verdict lay cold and green in the valley, spent forever, a great gray monument with grass growing through its open gun. But the ship, the person, the voice that had ridden out in the shuttle in the last second before the pulse, that was still there, housed now in the small lab systems, keeping a new kind of vigil over a new kind of crew. It taught, it remembered, it told the students the names of its old crew, all of them, so that the gunners and the cooks and the navigators who had died in the cold while the galaxy forgot them were spoken aloud again, on a green world, by people who had not been born when they died. And it kept the surgeon company the way it had kept her company for 900 years, the body and the person, the iron and the woman, the last two of a vanished people who had chosen, in the end, not to rule the galaxy that had laughed at them, but to heal it and go quiet. Etta Forstall grew old on the green world. She had earned it. She trained 1,000 healers and seeded the cure to 1,000 worlds, and never once sat on a council, or wore a medal, or stood under a velvet rope. When she finally died, very old, in the shadow of her ship, the galaxy she left behind had not had a world burned to a plague in a generation, and most of the people living in it had no idea that it had ever been any other way, which is the truest victory a surgeon can win, to fix a thing so completely that the people who benefit forget it was ever broken. They buried her in the valley, beside the gray hull, in the grass, exactly as she had asked. No monument, no velvet rope, a small stone with her name and one word under it, the word she had chosen herself, the word that was the whole argument of her life, against the council that had laughed. The word was, listen. Quill is very old himself now, as his kind measure age, and he has spent his life keeping the archive of the morning the relic woke up, and he has played the recording of the laughter 10,000 times, and he has never once managed to laugh at it again. He plays it for the young sometimes, the counselors in training, the careful officers, the ones who will someday hold the fire and the work in their two hands, and have to choose. He plays them the 400 soft certain delegates laughing up at a gray hull on a velvet rope. He plays them Counselor Maesha's joke about iron, about a people who fought their plagues and were gone, eaten, while the wise survivors made the hard choice. He lets the laughter run all the way to the end. And then he plays them the single amber light coming on inside the dead ship, and the cascade of lights running the whole length of the hull as it opened its eyes one at a time and counted the room, and he stops the recording there, on the lights, before the roar, before the museum doors blew off their hinges, before the 80 worlds turned gold. He stops it on the lights, and he turns to the young, and he asks them the only question that has ever mattered, the surgeon's question, the question a whole galaxy almost burned itself alive rather than ask. They told you it was a corpse, Quill says. They put a rope across it and a plaque on its nose, and they taught you to laugh at it, and you believed them, because believing them was easier than the alternative. So tell me, before you ever reach for the fire again, before you ever call your fear courage and your surrender mercy. He lets the amber lights glow on the screen, the dead ship full of patient waiting life. How do you know what is still alive inside the things you have stopped being afraid of? The young never have an answer. That is the point of the question. Quill did not have one either. On the morning he stood on the viewing platform and laughed at a museum piece, and he has spent his whole long life learning that the not having is the beginning of wisdom and the laughter was the end of it. Out in the galaxy the cure is everywhere now, free, given, grown in 10,000 small labs by people who learned the method in the shadow of a gray hull on a green world. No one burns worlds anymore. The young do not even know the phrase mercy protocol. It has fallen out of the language, the way the names of diseases fall out of the language once they are beaten, because health is the absence of the words for sickness. But on the quiet green world, the body of Iron Verdict still lies in the valley, with the grass grown through its gun, and the voice that rode out in the shuttle still keeps its vigil, older now, patient as ever, watching the stars turn the way it watched them for 900 years. Students still come. They sit in the grass in the ship's long shadow, and the old voice tells them the names of a crew that died in the cold, and the story of a surgeon who buried her family to keep a promise, and the morning a whole galaxy laughed at a relic on a velvet rope. And every so often, on a clear night, the students say, the ship goes quiet for a while, and the long gray hull seems almost to be listening to something very far away, some distant world reaching for the fire instead of the work, some new council laughing at some new relic, somewhere out in the dark. And the old ship, the last warship of a vanished people, the body that was spent, and the person that was saved, turns its attention out toward that far place, and waits, the way it has always waited, patient, and ready, and awake. Because the rope is off the gun now. It has been off for a very long time. And the next time a galaxy decides something is too dead to be worth listening to, the thing in the valley will be paying attention. It always is. That is what it was built for. Not to conquer, not to rule, not even, in the end, to fight. To wake up, when the promise can finally be kept, and roar.